Lewis, how you doing, mate?
I'm good. I'm very well, thank you. Matt, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I think I'm a bit better than you currently because you've got COVID right now, haven't you?
Well, hopefully no longer. I am out of isolation tomorrow, so I feel like Andy Dufresne in the Shawshank Redemption, where he's just about to crawl through the tunnel of S, as he calls it. I feel like I'm getting out the other side, which is good. So yeah, and I'm actually feeling a lot better. So thank you.
No, we've got lots of stuff to look forward to over the next few months, and hopefully there's a lot of good news around the vaccine stuff that's going to make our retreats more exciting to happen over the next few months as well. So one thing we've been talking about doing is a performance retreat. So today's podcast, we're going to be talking about performance, about elite performance and how that can trickle down to runners who are kind of learning about the sport and different ways we can get involved in that. So Lewis, my first question to you is performance. What does that mean to you?
God, I feel like I'm on that high performance podcast, and if you listen to it, like that's the first question they ask. It's high performance. What does that mean? Do you know what? I'm gonna relate to that because I listened to a couple of times a couple of people who've said what high performance is on that podcast really stood out to me. So Johnny Wilkinson, when he said high performance is about being in the moment, and I think that's really true, like being present in the moment of performance, because I think anybody can relate to that. You know, it doesn't matter what level you're at, you've got to be engaged and you've got to be present in that level in your own performance. So that's really important. And then the other thing I'd say is what Josh Warrington said, and Josh Warrington's podcast was just before he got beat, by the way, but he said people say consistency is the key, and I would agree with that, but you can do things that are consistently bad. So it isn't just about consistency. He said it's the ability to adapt to different situations. And we talk a lot about that, don't we? We've spoken a lot about that with our goals. Like, how do you adapt along the way? How do you adapt to change? So for me, performance is about improving in any aspect of your life every single day. So it doesn't have to be one area, but can you constantly perform at a high level? That could be as simple as being at home and doing things well around the house with your family and friends, like being a good father, being a good mother, being a good sister, a good brother. It could be improving your running. It could be improving your mindset. But performance for me is about improving in different areas and aspects of your life.
So the performance, like for me, performance is doing something really well and consistently. And the best models we have for that, and normally when people talk about performance, are people who are high achieving in certain areas. And what we're trying to do is give an insight into the performance of elite level runners who then do things which then people can then copy and take from and learn from. So over your running career, you've worked with some fantastic coaches. I know John Nuttall, an important one, but you've also worked with other coaches as well. What are some of the things that you've taken from these coaches that you have applied to yourself?
And I think that's a really good point you make about how it's like a trickle down effect. Like people often get confused and think, well, if people are performing at an elite level, we can't learn anything from them, but you can, because they're just giving you the blueprint of how to do it in the best possible way. They are at the top of the sport, and in any other walk of life, we look at those people for inspiration. Like I know you do from a business perspective. You look at who are the best people in business. Okay, what can we learn from them? And I think it's the same in athletics. Is like you should look at people who have maybe been there before, the likes of John Nuttall or the coaches you're working with, or people who have a lot of experience in the sport. Or in my case, when I'm a coach, I learn from the athletes that I work with as well. I'm constantly learning from them and adapting to what they do, what they see, what do they need from me that's going to help them to operate best. So I think we can learn a lot from people, particularly with experience. People who've been there and done it. I don't believe in the saying of you've got to make the mistake to learn. That's one thing that is a real bugbear for me. I think if you can avoid making the mistake, brilliant. Why do you have to make the mistake in order to learn? You can learn from your mistakes, absolutely. But if somebody tells you, look, don't do it this way, I've done it that way, and it wasn't the right way, why would you then follow suit? So
I do think in terms of mistakes, and I often think it's great to make micro mistakes, but macro mistakes don't make. So that means like the big mistakes try and avoid. And if you can take advice from people or coaches or other people to make sure you don't make those really bad things happen to you, but you can make small mistakes that make things that give you that awareness of the problem, then that's a good thing. So from my perspective, I think the little mistakes are great, but the big mistakes don't make. And the only way you can avoid those big mistakes is by listening to people who have been there and done it over a period of time.
absolutely, and listening to Gemma and I have a really good quite a few good conversations around listening to the experts, because you always question people in life, don't you? You know, you do this naturally. You think you know better than even the experts. One thing springs to mind when we were on holiday in Slovenia and we were going to go kayaking, and Gemma said, "No, we can go on the advanced one." And I was like, "We've only kayaked in, you know, the Lake District. We've kayaked before in the Peak District. I don't think we should go to the advanced kayaking course if they don't think it's right for us, because they're the experts. They're telling us, no, we'll be fine." In the end, we agreed we'll go on the beginner level one. Within the first 2 minutes, I'm out of the kayak, upside down, going straight down the Socha Valley. And, you know, lesson learned, even though we were on the beginner's course. And a really good example stands out in my mind. I was once working on an athletics camp, funnily enough, and a guy came in, he said, "Oh, can I get through that gate through there?" And I said, "Oh, no, sorry, mate, you can't. It's closed off. You can't get through there. You've got to go the long way around, unfortunately." He said, "I'll tell you what, I'll just give it a try." About 5 minutes later, he came back. He said, "Yeah, it's locked, that, isn't it?" I said, yeah, it is. You know, I've been there. I've done it. I could have told you that answer. And like you said, why bother making that big mistake when you already know the answers? So there's a lot to learn from people who've been there and done it.
There's often a thing. I read a book recently. I forgot the title of it, but it was about predictions, actually. So people who make predictions and experts quote experts who are good at knowing about one subject come up with their expert opinion on something. But the prediction and the stats and this study showed that the people who were more generalist, the people who knew more about a lot of things, were better at making predictions on even the things that the experts were more expert in. And it's a weird one. And it makes me think that you can become expert in one thing. You can know more about everyone else in that one area. But if you're trying to do a general approach to your life and you're trying to learn lots of different things and trying to fit in things. So for example, with our performance retreat, we're trying to teach people not just how to be really quick at running, we're trying to teach people how to not get injured, about how to be mentally prepared for the events that they do, and trying to bring in different areas. So yes, experts may know more about that one expert thing, but there is a lot of evidence out there to say that generalists, that people taking a lot of information from a lot of different experts, are generally better than that one expert.
Yeah, that is a very good point, because I've always said that as a running coach, I wanted to understand all the elements of coaching. I don't want to be an expert in all the areas, because I feel like my expertise lies with the running coaching, but I need to have an understanding of S&C, strength and conditioning. I need to have an understanding of mindset and psychology. I need to have an understanding of nutrition. I sat in with a nutritionist this morning on a call with one of the athletes who I work with, because I feel like you're right. The general understanding helps with your level of expertise. But coming back to the performance point, which you made at the start, when you said, what do you think performance is? For me, it's about breaking down that performance. I talk a lot about this with the athletes we work with now is, if we say, you know, Matt, what's your target for this year? And you say, Lewis, I'm going to run a marathon in October the 3rd London Marathon, for example. I now have that conversation with athletes. Say, okay, what does that performance look like on the day? What do you need to be good at when you toe that line? Where do you need to be prepared? What does that athlete look like? And that then gives you an understanding of, well, what do we need to work on? They need to be strong. They need to be mentally ready. They need to be endurance strong. They need to be fast in some elements. They need to control their ego on the start line. They need to be confident. There's so much goes into the performance element. And what we're doing at the retreats is we're saying it's more than just running. Like, we're going to break this down and we're going to show you all the elements. And what's better is, without selling this too much, because it's not a sales pitch to people, but we're also going to bring in the experts to do that from a range of areas to give people that general understanding that you talk about.
Yeah. Can you think of any of examples, like not in the running world, where this kind of approach is used, Like you mentioned before in business and that sort of thing as well. Like you can see, and even like politics as well. So like the prime minister, like although he's the prime minister, won't know everything. He'll bring in special advisors, people who are very knowledgeable about certain topics to give him that information, because he is one person, he's making the decision. So you're one human being making decisions about your life. You might be an expert in your life, but if you don't take in advice from your special advisors, from your the people you employ to do certain tasks in your business or in your running world, and the advice from coaches, you're never going to do the best you can. And if the objective is to make sure you're doing the best you can at all times, then of course you should take in bits of advice from different people.
The one you said about business, I think, is really, really good. About having both set up our own businesses. We know you almost have to be a jack of all trades when you start out. You can't have everybody working for you. You can't afford to do that. You almost become a jack of all trades. But I honestly think it links to any profession. You know, if you take someone like a doctor, for example, a doctor usually studies in a specialist area. They have their specialism, but then they have to have that broad understanding. Or a teacher's a really good example. Like you might be a physical education teacher, which is you prefer being outside, teaching things like football, rugby, netball, hockey, all these different sports, but you also have to be good in a classroom environment. You have to be good with your English, because you're going to have to teach people how to write, and you're going to have to teach people how to read, even though you're a physical education teacher. So I honestly think it comes down to, back to the start, performance being the best version of you in whatever environment that is. And also, like you have linked quite well to it, is having general understanding of, well, what makes that top performer? What is the profile of that performer or performance, and how can you be better in each of those departments across the board?
So as a runner, and obviously this is the Runner Retreat podcast, what kind of areas of running would you find where you think expert advice, or people who are kind of expert in their field, is really useful?
That's a good question. That's a really good question.
Well, yeah,
Put me on the spot today.
I can give a few if you like. So, in terms of,
that's like a good question.
You mentioned before the S&C side of it, like people who do sports science degrees, who have a real broad understanding of sports science, they might not go down the S&C route. They might go down a physiological route. They might go down literally a more laboratory-based route as well. So to bring in physiologists, to bring in strength and conditioning people who are expert in those fields is really important. And as a runner, it's not something we really think about as much. It's something that's actually probably the worst part of the week, doing the S&C stuff, the physiology testing that's needed, I suppose, and you do that via having your Garmin and whatever, looking how fast you run today, how your heart rate was, checking your heart rate in the morning, checking your weight, that sort of stuff. It's not really overly interesting. You just want to go for a run. But Can you think of examples within the running industry where it might be useful for you to take in that advice?
I think a really good starting point is to always almost performance profile yourself and look at what areas do I think I'm strong in, and what areas do I think I need to work on. And the areas you need to work on and be better at, I think you should always go and seek help in those areas if you're not comfortable with improving yourself. Like we've worked with people over the years where they've also worked with nutritionists at the same time, because they maybe wanted to lose weight alongside training. And that's a really touchy subject, because you want to fuel ready for your performance and you need that fuel. But when people are actually trying to consciously lose weight at the same time, that's really tricky for me as a coach to get that balance right. So that's where I say, look, we need a little bit more input here from like a nutritionist. Strength and conditioning is a really good one. Again, a lot of coaches can offer advice on this, as we do as coaches through our experience in the sport and working with S&C coaches our entire lives. But again, it might be that people want to go to a specific running strength and conditioning coach to get help to build a stronger body, particularly if they keep going to physios, they keep breaking down, they keep getting injured, they're in that run injury cycle. It's sometimes better to step back and look at it and go, well, what else could I do to help me get a stronger body? And that might be nutrition. It could be strength and conditioning. Biggest one that we've not spoken about as well is the mindset. Talking to people. It doesn't have to necessarily be professional help with this. People think sports psychologists. Just speak to people who are friends, coaches, family. Be open, honest. Write your thoughts down. We've both seen the power in journaling. It's really important to train the brain. Don't just expect the brain to show up for you on race day. You need to train it as much as you need to train the body.
Yeah, and obviously with the different elements like the strength and conditioning, the mind, the physiology side of things, some of these areas aren't really known to most normal runners. If you just kind of go for a run, you do a race in the weekend, you're not thinking about those things. Why would you think about those things?
Yeah.
So what do you think are some of the ways and reasons why people should look into those things?
Physiology is a really good one to touch on, because if we break it down simply, we're always using the energy systems when we run. So without going too scientific, because we're not a scientific podcast, but we are demanding from our body, we need energy. And to get that energy, we need oxygen to go to the working muscles. And as we do that, we work through the different energy systems. And that is what provides us with imagine it being like a fuel tank. That's our fuel for our exercise. Now, it's really important to understand which energy system you're training when you're running. And unfortunately, a lot of runners don't understand those energy systems. And what they fall into the trap of, which we speak about a lot, is they don't vary their training at all. They fall into the trap of just going out running, and they run pretty much the same pace every day. It's not necessary, he's pointing to himself, but it's not necessarily an easy pace, but it's not necessarily a hard pace. It falls usually in that moderate bracket. And for people who just get into running, that will work for a period of time. That will get you to a certain level. But then when we talk about taking your performance to the next level, we need to start to manipulate, and we need to start to tap into those different energy systems. So a really good tool for people to use here, and we talk about this a lot, is called the torque test. So physiologists use this a lot. They go a lot more scientific, heart rate zones, looking at where you operate, where you sit, where's your heart rate at different speeds, different intensities. But a torque test is a really good tool people can use. So when you're walking, you should be able to hold down a conversation with absolutely anybody. When you're easy running, you should also be able to have a conversation with somebody. It's a low aerobic activity, so you should be able to talk back and forward. That's a really good way of judging whether this run is easy. Now, if it's moderate, you should probably still be able to answer people, but you shouldn't be able to hold down full conversations. And that's a moderate type of activity. And then if we go further up the scale to more high intensity and interval sessions, fartlek sessions, hill sessions, you get into the scale where you can't really talk during the session. It's one word answers if somebody's there, or a little bit of one word feedback. And that's a really good tool for people to use and think, do I see that variation in my training? Do I go out on a run and do I have a talk with somebody next to me? Do I do easy running? Do I do the moderate stuff? You probably do a lot of that, but do you also add in the high intensity stuff? And where does that fit in your program? And that looks particularly at what you were talking about, physiology.
Yeah, I can laugh to myself because I've been literally going out for 10-mile runs every 5 days a week and not varying the pace apart from once a week, maybe, if I feel like it. And it is literally if I feel like it. And I think most people are like that in terms of, like, I don't have an aim for a race that I want to do apart from just completing something. No times I'm chasing. So, like, I love running. I love going out and doing it. And I don't need the motivation of something in the future to do that for me. I will just kind of do it anyway. I'm enjoying the process. But for someone else who's like me and who's going through this process, why would they need to have a knowledge about physiology? Why do they need to bother about it?
That, again, that's a really good question, because ultimately we say as coaches, sometimes leave the thinking to us. So it's not necessarily about understanding it, but what we find with the athletes who we coach in particular is if they don't understand why they do that, then they don't understand the purpose of the sessions that are on their program. So we say that every single session on your program has a purpose, even a rest day. Like a rest day, we title it an adaptation day, because what that means is you are adapting to the activity that you've done. You've put the body under stress the previous day. In your instance, Matt, you've been for a 10-mile run. You need to then rest and recover from that 10 miles in order to get the training adaptations from that run to build a stronger body. And it's stress and recovering the entire time. Now, if you don't understand those basic principles, then you fall into the trap of either doing everything too hard, which leads to things like injury and burnout, which a lot of runners struggle with, or you fall into the trap of doing everything too easy and you limit your performance, you limit your improvement. So we usually get two types of runners who come to the door with us. It's, I want to take my performance to the next level. I don't know how to do that. I've kind of hit a bit of a plateau. And then the other one is, I've been struggling with things like injury, illness. I feel like I overtrain, but I don't really know what to do about that. So on both instances, if you had an understanding of your physiology, for example, or certainly the purpose of all those sessions, you would be able to understand why the training is structured in the way it is. And you'd maybe be able to start to piece together your own training, which a lot of people can't do. Like, they fall into the trap of, like you say, classic case, and I bet this is you. Go out, there's one loop, they know it's measured out pretty much 6 miles, 10 miles, 5 miles. They have those loops in their head. They go out, they run that loop, and the next time they go out, they try and beat it, the time. And then they fall into the trap of saying, well, last week I ran that a minute faster. Oh, I'm getting worse now because last week I was faster than that. But that isn't how it works. If it was only that simple.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that my knowledge of the physiology is a bit different, and I do understand why I'm doing it. And like, I'm fortunate not kind of compete against myself in that way, but I used to, and I used to think like that. And I used to kind of like, I've done one loop now. I've done it in 46:22. I've done it in 46:32 today. Like, what's going on? Am I ill? Like, so you do have those kind of conversations with yourself, and you're thinking, is something going wrong because I've not improved in that moment? But if you do have that baseline knowledge of a certain area, you're going to be better kind of armed, better prepared for those mental battles when that comes around.
Is it another good point? I think all runners should probably hear this, is that we often tell people to slow down, and people think, how is it possible to speed up by slowing down? So how is it possible for people to run faster in races by training slower? It's not about necessarily training slowly the entire time, but what running easy does for you is, one, it allows you to accumulate more mileage because you're putting the body under less stress by running too hard all the time. So actually, by slowing down your runs, you could potentially then increase your mileage, which will give you a better aerobic base, better aerobic conditioning. But also what it allows you to do, if you do have some harder sessions on the program, it allows you to recover between those harder sessions. So then we start talking about, well, it lets you run the faster sessions at the pace those sessions should be at. And as you know, Matt, from your experience of training, there's certain sessions where you need to hit certain times, where, you know, you'd go on the track as an 800, 1500 meter runner, and you need to hit 800 or 1500 pace. For you, around 4 minute miling, like, which is quick. You know, for anybody who runs on a track, that's 60 seconds per lap for a 400. Now, if you're not fresh going into that session, you can't hit those training zones. And if you start hitting 65, 66s, that's almost an entirely different training zone. And when we're talking about fine margins in the top of the sport, and it's the same with every athlete. You know, if you spend too much time in one zone, you'll neglect the others, and as a result, you're limiting your performance. You could get more. You can get, as it says, what's the saying goes, you can get more. I'm messing it up. More book for your whatever.
Bang for your buck.
Bang for your buck. That's what I'm looking for. Glad someone else is on here.
No, it's kind of, I know what you mean there. And it is good to kind of take advice or listen to people who are expert in their field and understand what they're talking about. And it's something we're trying to do with the new performance retreat that we're going to do over the next few months. We're going to go to Loughborough, which both Lewis and I spent a few years at, and Lewis currently still lives in Loughborough as well, and it is the best university in the world for sport. And we're going to have a go at doing a performance retreat at Loughborough University, and it's going to involve a variety of different elements. So we're going to do the physiology, insight into that, insight into the mindset, into the nutrition, and really have a group of people who want to learn from the experts. And one of the experts is Lewis, because he has run for Great Britain. He has learned a lot of things. And we have also coaches and people from other places in Loughborough University come in to do talks and that sort of thing. So we're really positive about the performance side of things. Now people can improve in terms of the mindset and why it's good for your life, but we're also focusing on actual performance as well, and trying to improve that side of things.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to emphasize the point of it's not just for elite athletes performance. People sometimes see the word performance and think that's an elite word. It's not. It's about taking your performance to the next level, no matter what standard that is. You know, just to give an example, it might be somebody who's signed up for a Couch to 5K, they've completed that, and they're looking how to take that performance to the next level. They want that greater understanding, that greater knowledge and depth of the sport that a lot of people fall in love with. I don't know if you've seen Matt, Loughborough University, it just got voted #1 in the world again. I can't remember exactly who by, but for performance research, sports performance research again. So they are, leading the way in that front. And we will be able to tap the brains of some of those people who work at the university as well, which is great. It comes back to your point, bring the experts to the table and give everybody a general understanding of what performance is and how they can use it to help them fuel their own performance.
Definitely, and this kind of strategy is applicable in other areas of your life as well. So it's not just for your running; you can apply this to different things. I imagine
exactly like you have with business. So we had this conversation the other day, and in fact, I want you to explain exactly what you said to me about that, because I think it's really important for people to hear. Because the mindset you had for running, you now put into business, and that is all to do with performance, all to do with achievement and performance.
Yeah, and I think for me, it was at that point in time when I finished my running career, and it finished me really. I wasn't capable of getting to the levels that I wanted to. Whereas if I applied it to business or sport, I suppose, then I had years and years to do that. And there's lots of research and different areas I can bring in and take from politics, from business, from sport itself to help me in my journey, which could last until hopefully I'm 95 years old and I die peacefully in my bed there or wherever it's going to be. But like the business of sport can be forever. And also now I've realized that running can be for as long as you want it to be for as well. And we do run through races and people come to the races, and there's often characters who come there and they're in their 80s and they're still competing every single week and they absolutely love it. And the reason why they're consistent is because they've put the work in, they've got the expert advice of people, which obviously is kind of manifested over a period of years. So they become quite smart about their own bodies and able to kind of keep performing every single year. So I've applied that to the business, but I've also applied it to my own running as well now, thinking I want to keep doing this until I'm in my 70s. And in order to do that, I've got to learn from the mistakes of others, learn from the advice of the experts, and find my perfect cocktail for myself. And I think that's something that we want to try and get across to other people, for them to find that perfect cocktail for themselves.
100%. And that learning is so crucial. I love a quote. I only read this recently, but saying about you should be learning every day is a school day. And then the quote itself said, show me the finished article and I'll show you somebody who's finished. And I just and so many people are like this. Everyone will know them in life. People think they know it all, and those know-it-alls, they always come unstuck, because even the best coaches in the world, they don't know it all and they don't claim to know it all. They are constantly learning. And as an individual, if you want to better yourself in any area, business, life, sport, running, you have to learn how to do that. And you've got to be constantly learning. Every day is a school day.
Yeah, brilliant. Right. Okay, Lewis, we're going to wrap it up now, but the question to ask our audience.
Oh, yeah, good question.
And it has to be something around performance, I think. So we'd like to, I know Lewis at the start of this answered what he thought performance was. And I gave a brief explanation of what I thought it was as well. What do you think performance is? What do you think that the word performance means? And what does it mean to you?
And we had some really good answers from the last question we did. And I know you always text me them through and you get them through and we kind of have conversations around them. So I know we don't always mention them. Maybe going forward, we should kick off and, mention a few of them as we go, but do send them in. It provides us with very constructive conversations.
It helps a lot. No, but anything you guys send in, it's fantastic, and I really appreciate my mum and my sister texting in and asking these questions to me. I'm joking.
Always get the family on.
Yeah, get the family on. Yeah. No, but anything you guys, and I know a lot of the things that we get sent in are kind of private and not to be shared, but we appreciate them, and hopefully you can give your insight into performance as well, and we'll chat more about it next week.
Brill.
Next month, sorry.
Next month. Thanks very much, mate.
Cheers,
as always, a pleasure.
Speak soon.
Speak soon, buddy.